Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vikings Central podcast. I have Tom here with me again today, ready for another episode. Thanks for hopping on, Tom. And again, you can follow Thomas on Twitter at ThomasGorski33. He's very active over there. Go give him a follow. Guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you could, please hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, and turn on that bell for notifications. All right, Thomas. No, this has been going on for the last couple of days. There's been a lot of talk on Twitter. Kirk Cousins is always talked about on Twitter, so it's nothing new. Judd Zolgad of Score North used to be a Vikings beat writer. I'm sure still has connections within the Vikings organization. I think everyone knows that. Reported a couple days ago that Carolina had made a call to the Vikings regarding Kirk Cousins. And I think a lot of people on Twitter, which is not unusual, kind of took it out of proportion that, Carolina's going to make this trade. Their trade talks are ongoing. Something's going to go down. And then kind of other parts of the media kind of was like, it's kind of just like what's the price tag on Kirk Cousins? And I think that doesn't come as a surprise because it's very early on in the process. And I'm sure a lot of teams are reaching out on guys that could be available on what it would take to get them, just trying to evaluate the market a little bit. But as soon as you heard that, what were you kind of thinking? Does that make sense to you? And just what are you kind of looking at on that end?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense from a Carolina standpoint. Matt Rule's job is on the line this year. They are, just like Judd said, they are desperate. I mean, the fact that you're initiating a call about Kirk Cousins just shows how desperate you are, because nobody wants to trade for Kirk Cousins and that contract. So it's going to be the first of many calls. With the combine coming up this week or next week, Pittsburgh will be talking to him. That's another team who comes up. Cleveland potentially. There's a lot of teams that are going to want Kirk Cousins' services. Minnesota's going to listen. They're not initiating these calls, and from what it sounds like, they didn't go anywhere. It was probably just a phone call, seeing the price tag. Minnesota's like, he's not available right now. Unless Pick 6 is on the table, then we could talk. Yeah. Because Carolina more than likely just lowballed them with an offer. But who knows if they even got an offer, because we don't know if Minnesota is even interested in moving Cousins, because from what it sounded like, they said, not right now. So to me, that kind of came across as, especially with the report that came out about Cousins wanting an extension and not taking a team-friendly deal, maybe by not right now, they mean we're working on an extension and convincing him to take a pay cut. If he doesn't, then he's available. Right. We could kind of cross paths at a later time. But Darren Dougie Wolfson, who's a guest on Score North, he's as tuned in as anyone when it comes to the Vikings. Yeah, more so than national guys, because they have to cover so much. But he said he's talked to two guys that he respects very much. And the two guys shot down both the Odell Beckham Jr. Cleveland rumors, the Xavier Howard rumors, when over the past 2 years at the deadline, every time he would talk to them, they got back to him quickly. And they said, BS. Don't believe it. There's something, I'm paraphrasing there. He did the same, and he said they responded fairly quickly because that's a very quick text. He said he asked about the Kirk Cousins one, and he's like, so far, dead silent. They're not confirming nor denying. And so he's like, you would take it with a grain of salt as it is. So, I mean, they're going to answer these calls, but it's going to take a Matthew Stafford-like package to really move Kirk Cousins, because you don't just inherit, a top 15 quarterback. It just doesn't happen, and that's kind of like what O'Connell and them did in Minnesota. I'm still on the side where I think Kwesi isn't sold on Cousins. O'Connell just seems like the type of guy that he would love Cousins. He'll work with them. But he also seems like a very flexible guy where he could be convinced on anything. And basically, if you just give him a quarterback to work with, he'll work with them. I think he
Yeah.
just prefers Kirk Cousins because he knows
Yep.
that'll give him the best chance to win now. But
Right.
I just think it's interesting that it came out publicly, and the fact that like Judd knows about it, and then eventually Pro Football Talk picked it up in other companies. There's smoke where there's fire, and I think
Yeah.
that'll be just the first of many leaked Kirk Cousins to somewhere stories. And is it his agent pushing it out, or is it the Vikings? That's kind of where we're at right now.
Did I lose you there? Oh no, you're there. Okay. Yeah. No. No. Exactly. I think this, especially this time of the year, there's going to be a lot of talks. And like you said, the Vikings said not right now, so they have a lot to work through regarding the cap. They have a lot of stuff to figure out. I mean, Kevin O'Connell just got in the office last week. They have a lot of stuff to sift through here in the next few weeks, and I think the trade talks, like you said, are really going to maybe amp up next week. I mean, there's going to be a lot of more calls, especially with the combine going on. There's going to be a lot of guys talking about a lot of different things at the combine. A lot of things are going to start swirling, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think, like you said, it could be very comparable to the Matthew Stafford trade from last year. If we do trade Kirk, I see us getting like a Jared Goff type back, so it could be like Baker Mayfield. I mean, if the Panthers do end up doing something, we'll get Sam Darnold back, and then another team I think that has a win. Like a ready to win right now roster is the Indianapolis Colts. And, I know a lot of people aren't a fan of Carson Wentz, but I'd way rather take Carson Wentz than Jared Goff. So if we get that same, like, comparable draft capital back with Carson Wentz as the Rams did from the Lions, I think it's gonna be very interesting to see. And I don't know if the Colts are interested at all in Kirk Cousins,
Should
but
with that
they have a
offensive
really good,
and those
yeah,
weapons and that defense. The only
yeah,
issue is they don't have a first round pick this year, so it's hard because you can't really convince them to
yeah,
part ways with that. But maybe if you
right,
take Wentz back, you will get a first next year.
right, exactly.
Change. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they can make it work because they have a good defense and, like you said, a bunch of weapons, and that division is not that tough. You got Houston, Jacksonville, and then you do have Tennessee, but I think Tennessee has kind of played over their expectation the last couple. I think they're a good team, but I think they're definitely beatable in that division. So I think that division's wide open if the Colts want to make a big move like that. And like you said, where else are they going to go at quarterback? They don't have a first round pick. It's not like they're going to draft a guy that's going to be ready this year or anything like that. So I think we could keep an eye out on that possibility as well. All right. Next up, speaking of Kirk Cousins, we're going to kind of go through a list of guys that are, some veterans, some guys that are they going to be back? Are they going to get traded? Are they going to get released? So speaking of Kirk Cousins, at this point right now, Tom, do you think Kirk Cousins is on this roster week 1 of the 2022 NFL season?
As of this current moment, yes. All signs and all reports are pointing towards Kirk Cousins is going to remain here, even though we had our 4th or 5th day in a row of Ian Rappaport on the Pat McAfee show saying he doesn't believe a lot of these rumors, just simply because he doesn't think anyone's going to trade for a $35 million base salary and $45 million cap hit. He's like,
Right.
it's just not going to happen. So he thinks it's just going to be hard to see Cousins go. And unless they get an offer they can't refuse, like Carolina at pick 6, if you get that offer, you run and you take it. But I don't see how Cousins being dealt benefits a first year GM and first year head coach. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's in the cards right now for them to really move Cousins. But again, if contract talks take a turn and Cousins wants to be paid $40 to $45 million per year, I think that's career suicide if you give Cousins that contract as a first-year GM for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. So, I mean, my personal opinion, I would say explore the options and move on. But for here, we're going with only basing it off of reports and all knowledge that is public regarding Kirk Cousins and the 2022 season. All signs are pointing towards Cousins is staying. So I would put it at maybe like 80-20 that Cousins is the starter next year. I wouldn't put it past them to just have him play out the deal, and whatever happens, happens. Just maybe use it as a reset year, which means other guys could go. But Cousins will be the first domino to fall, and he controls everything. He controls what happens with Hunter, with bringing Pat Pete back potentially, and other guys. So we'll find out in about 2 to 3 weeks at the latest of what's going on there. Does he stay with the cap hit? Does he get extended to lower it, but then you're in the same situation 3 years from now, 2 years from now? It's going to be interesting because, you don't hire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. You fire Zimmer and Spielman just to extend Cousins again. Because ultimately that's what got Spielman fired. Ownership last year, Spielman and them, they had trade talks about Cousins last year with San Francisco for Jimmy G, a second and a fourth. Looking back at it now, that was pretty good value for Kirk Cousins. And you could move on from Garoppolo right now if you truly wanted to. But ownership kind of stepped in the way and said, no. You signed this guy. You told us you could win with him. You're not trading him. So if the Wills were kind of like it's hard to say because there's this whole committee they have there, that search committee, where it seemed like they had more power in the coaching search than Kwesi did. Whoever, like Andrew Miller and Jim Stapleton are, those guys who no one has ever heard of, but maybe they control what's going on. I mean, the Wilfs were praising Cousins throughout their entire interview after O'Connell's press conference. So I don't know because I don't know what to believe. It's smoke screen season. And I talked to Ben Gosling. I wrote a piece and I interviewed Ben Gosling, and he told me before the official offseason started with the hiring of Kwesi and O'Connell. He said ownership was kind of tired of Kirk Cousins and paying him the top tier money and not being able to spread it out multiple years. And that gave the Wills a bad taste in their mouth, and it bugs them. So if you take that with what they said at the press conference about he's our guy and that we really believe in him going forward and we plan on him being here, could they just be selling it as well, keeping their cards close to their chest?
Right.
There's a lot going on, but I think so far
there is.
Cousins is probably staying.
Yeah, at this point, I'd have to agree with you. And like you said, all signs are pointing towards that, but it doesn't really surprise me that Ian Rappaport is saying any of this. And, during the press conferences, they were backing up Kirk Cousins. Yeah, that's our guy. That's our guy. It doesn't surprise me at all. Even if I thought they were going to trade him, that's what these guys are going to say at this point. It's early on in the process. I mean, Ian Rappaport, he's either tweeted out a video or he was on the Pat McAfee show. He said Kirk Cousins is going to be a Viking. He said the same thing every single day. He has no new substance at all. He doesn't even say, I've spoken to people within the Vikings organization. He hasn't even said that. He just said, it is my belief that Kirk Cousins will be back. He will be a Viking in 2022. So, he can believe that all he wants. I mean, he hasn't added any new substance to this, so I think it's just a guessing game at this point, even for the top tier media guys. So, my answer right now as well is yes, he will be a Viking, but next week at this time, maybe in an episode down the line, about a week from now, our answers could change. You never know. That's how much can shift within a week at this point. So that's going to be the domino, the leading domino. Once that falls, we're going to see how this roster is going to play out. And another guy that has been with the Minnesota his whole career, fan favorite, born and raised in Minnesota. I think this is probably one of the least likely guys to move on, but you never know. Adam Thielen. You never know. There has been talks in the future in the past, that that he would maybe be traded to a contender at a couple trade deadlines and stuff like that. But in your opinion on Adam Thielen, Thomas, will he be a Viking come week 1?
100%. Thielen's not going anywhere. He's from Minnesota. He's the hometown kid. He's the underdog story. He's gonna finish his career in Minnesota. He's a Minnesota guy. He's a Midwestern guy. Just who he is, and he's taken 2 restructures already. He's probably gonna take another one. He won't be playing on like a $16 million cap hit. Yeah, I mean, no, Thielen's not going anywhere. He's too valuable, and when he's healthy, he's one of the best red zone targets in the entire league. He's Kirk Cousins'
sure.
a safety net. They go golfing together. They're very close. Thielen's taken Jefferson under his wings since he's got into the league. It's hard to imagine Thielen going, and all signs point towards Thielen. It'll get resolved. We'll figure out the contract. And he was even talking on the Vikings network with Gabe Henderson. And I believe that's the same one where he said, I know, I'm going to be one of the big key decisions that come up, but we're confident, things are going to get worked out. So, I mean, Thielen knows, him and his agent, they know that this is all going to get worked out. And honestly, if Zimmer was still here, I would say it's very less likely, knowing that Thielen's agent was very upset with Zimmer and his philosophy of the game of football.
Yep.
And, I think now with O'Connell in charge, it changes a lot of things, and more so, I think it should favor Thielen, just because he's an offensive guy.
Right.
So he's an offensive guy. I mean, him and O'Connell are going to be very close. I think O'Connell will be very buddy with Jefferson, and I think as long as Thielen's around here, he'll keep Thielen in the loop on everything. So Thielen will probably lower that cap hit, take a restructure. Maybe they'll free up like $5 to $7 million in cap space, lower that down to like 10. But yeah, so I'm fairly confident that Thielen's staying.
Yeah, nope, I agree. And there might be a small chance where it's a new front office, new coaching staff. They're not going to have that top tier loyalty. So there could be a small chance where they look to move on, look to go younger, look to go cheaper. But I think Adam Thielen and his agent do everything they can to stay in Minnesota. He's going to retire here. He lives here. He was born and raised here. And I cannot wait for that dynamic between Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. I cannot wait to see those relationships build and see where these guys can go, because it's going to be so different than Mike Zimmer and these guys. It's going to be so different. It's going to be so fun to see. I cannot wait. Cannot wait for that to happen. And then there's also been talks and rumors that even after Adam Thielen retires, he's going to want to be on the coaching staff with the Vikings, and I can definitely see that. And I think he's got a future in coaching. He's a very bright player, and he knows the X's and O's of the games. And I think he'd have a spot on this coaching staff once he retires. I know that's probably 5 years down the road, but I know they've talked about it. So I think that'd be really cool to see as well. But yeah, I think we both agree on that. It's almost 100% chance that he stays. I can't see Adam Thielen playing for a different team. I just can't see it.
The fan base would erupt.
Yeah,
they would erupt. Yeah, maybe he'll take.
That would be a first good impression from the new from the new GM and the new coach.
And I could definitely see him taking that Wes Welker approach. Welker, receivers coach in the league, and Thielen's got that. He's got that leadership style and just moxie to him. Where, if he wants to, I think he could potentially work his way up to a head coach one day. He's young enough.
I think he'd fit the bill, honestly. I think he does.
If he retires early, potentially, I wouldn't be shocked if he would just maybe in a few years, knowing that his time's coming to an end and he's not as elite as he used to be. Maybe instead of going to play for another team, he just retires. And he joins the staff in some capacity. But,
Thielen, nope, I can definitely see that.
there's no worry. So Vikings fans shouldn't be stressing about Adam Thielen potentially
Yeah.
playing for like Cleveland or somewhere. He's staying.
Yep. All right. After that Kirk Cousins decision, this will be the next big domino to fall, and it's probably your second best player on your entire team behind Justin Jefferson. The decision on Daniil Hunter. I know. I think he's owed like $26 million coming up. He's got like a big hit coming up. So there's going to have to probably have to have a decision made on that too. But man, I can't see Daniil Hunter not being on that defense. I know he's had a couple injuries in the past, but he is such a superstar when he is healthy. Like just the difference between him being on the field and him not being on the field, it could be like a top 15 defense to like a bottom 5 defense in the league. Like that's how big a difference he makes. In your opinion, Thomas, does this coaching staff, does Kwesi keep Daniil Hunter around the Vikings organization?
We don't know. We don't know exactly what's going through the minds of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell. Some noticed O'Connell did not mention Hunter's name. He mentioned Anthony Barr, who's not even under contract, as a top-tier guy on defense. So it's either A, he's not in your plans, or B, you just have a lot more faith in Anthony Barr than most people do, and you plan on bringing him back. But, this is the biggest domino of the fall. He controls a lot. He's got a $26.1 million cap hit. But most of that money is in a roster bonus for being on the roster. He'll be due $18 million by March 20th, which is 4 days after the new league year. So, I mean, that decision could even, like they could wait on that decision where they could get under the cap first and then make the decision. But he seems like the most logical candidate just to figure out how to get into the positive area for the cap space situation. I do think that there'll be some trades that are being explored with Hunter, simply because we don't know if he fits a 3-4. Andre Patterson departure, that's not talked about enough. So if Hunter is indeed unhappy, because Andre Patterson wanted to come back. He did not want to go anywhere else. He was totally fine staying as defensive line coach. But O'Connell just decided, he didn't even give him an interview or didn't really even meet him. He just wanted to clean house. So maybe that doesn't sit right with Hunter, and both sides could mutually part ways if they decided and explore a trade. The New York Giants would be the team that comes to mind. And they're so desperate for an edge rusher that they might overpay. And Hunter's worth a lot. I believe in my trade package from my article last night, I had Daniil Hunter in the 12th overall pick to the New York Giants for the 7th pick. Their first round this year, which I believe was like 36th overall, and then a second next year. So to me, that seems like fair composition for Hunter, who's only played 7 games in 2 seasons. And most, the last 2 seasons, the Vikings have had a bottom defense. It's been it's been embarrassing to watch as like a Vikings fan, just from a fan at home, because it's been you're last in nearly every category, and that's without Daniil Hunter. So I do think Kwesi knows what it takes to be successful in this league, and having a premier pass rusher, that comes to mind. When he was in San Francisco as a research developmental guy, they had Aldon Smith, where he has off the field issues, but he saw that pass rush ability, and he saw that dynamic, unbelievable edge rusher that could get to the quarterback. As a rookie or like a year 2 player, Aldon Smith nearly broke the sack record. So he's seen it firsthand. When he got to Cleveland, he saw Myles Garrett. You saw how much of a game wrecker Myles Garrett is, because when you have someone like that on defense, you can kind of fill all the other areas with mediocre talent if needed. Because at that point, you need them just to help your top guy. Just take the pressure off Myles Garrett just a little bit. So, let's sign Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney signs in Cleveland. Both guys are great pass rushers, but they won't focus so much on Garrett compared to Clowney. So I do think that if they Kwesi seems like the guy where he wants to keep Danielle Hunter. But I wouldn't put it past them to trade him and do a trade like I mentioned with the Giants and bring Barr back and use Barr simply as a edge rusher, which is what many believe that he's meant to be. And Barr's, according to Spotrac, is only supposed to cost about $7.5 million per year annually, and that's like nearly like $15 million less than Danielle Hunter. So they could explore it, but I just I would say between him and Cousins, I would say Hunter's probably in a little bit of trouble staying wise compared to Cousins. And he's up there as probably one of the top guys that are more than likely not going to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't see them moving one of the best edge rushers in the entire league. Unless they get blown away by an offer, I don't see it happening. I think they'll make it work with the cap, and I think unless Hunter is unhappy, there could be a report comes out that he's unhappy. He wants to be moved. Like you said, Andre Patterson was huge for Danielle Hunter. Unless something like that comes out, I think he stays. And we saw last year before his pec injury that he was back from that neck injury. He was back to his elite level playing. So I don't have an issue with that. And then he tore his pec, but that's a pretty common injury. Guys come back from that, pretty much no issue or anything like that. So I just don't see these guys letting Danielle Hunter go. If he wants to stay and they work it out, he's going to be on this team for the foreseeable future. I think we're pretty hand in hand there as well with Danielle Hunter coming back. All right, the next name, I mean, most of these guys we think are probably going to stick around. I mean, like Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith are the next two I have on this list. Do you think either of those guys are not going to be on the Vikings coming up this next season?
I think the plan's for them to be on this team, but Harrison Smith's going to have to restructure because they need to clear about $23 million in cap space because they're about $16 million over. The draft costs like $7 or $8 million. Something's got to give. So someone's going to know that you're not going to be pleased with, and it just depends on Cousins, because if you see Cousins sign a 3-year, $120 million deal for fully guaranteed money, you could say goodbye to Danielle Hunter. You could say goodbye to Patrick Peterson. You could say goodbye to Michael Pierce. You could say goodbye to so many players, because that just shows they're all in on Cousins and they'll just put whatever they can out there on defense. But yeah, Kendricks is staying. Harrison Smith at $16 million. They love Harrison Smith. He's gonna be a Viking for life. So if they needed to free up some cap space, I think they would more so explore a trade possibility for Eric Kendricks than explore Harrison Smith.
Yeah.
Just because Kendricks doesn't fit a 3-4 defense. He can probably make the transition, but as of now, he has no experience in it. I think they would be open to moving Kendricks. I really do. I don't think they would be initiating calls or anything like that. But I think if they kind of floated it out there and someone offered a second round pick this year, even if it's towards the end of the second round, I think Minnesota would bite. I really do. That inside linebacker position is you could easily replace that position. That's I know it's one of the most important positions in defense, but I think when you're in a 3-4 compared to a 4-3 where the guy in the middle, he's the captain, he controls everything, he's calling the plays.
Yep.
In a 3-4, there's a lot of guys. You got the 3 defensive linemen, you got the 2 inside linebackers, not one. And plus, the linebacker draft this upcoming year is fairly decent. There's Nakobe Dean from Georgia, Devin Lloyd from Utah. So, those are 2 guys, if you wanted to, just get younger and faster at that position, Maybe trading back from 12 and taking one of those guys, and then also trading
Yep.
Kendricks away. I mean, that just creates more flexibility for you to do it. But no,
Yep.
I mean, Kendricks, I don't think's going anywhere. Harrison Smith could go only if they hit the reset button. Because I think if they hit the reset button and they head to a rebuild, they're going to want to do good by Harrison Smith. And they're going to want to send him to a contender. Knowing that he's got
Yep.
3 years left, let's just send him somewhere like Baltimore or like
Right.
Cleveland. Like two teams who really need a safety to kind of take them to the next level on the defensive side of the ball. But no, those two, I would give it at least a 90% chance that they're both here in 2022 and starting and playing and having a significant impact on that defense.
Yep. No, I agree. We don't know how this coaching staff thinks. We don't know how these new guys in the fresh front office think. We don't know what's going through their heads at this point. All this again is guessing games. Kirk Cousins. That's the first domino. If we get rid of Kirk Cousins, this could honestly be like a total rebuild. They could look to move off a lot of these guys, and we don't expect them to, but you just never know. We got a lot of cap space we need to free up. Eric Kendricks doesn't fit a 3-4 defense, has no experience playing in it. Him and Anthony Barr are like brothers. So Anthony Barr is not going to be here next year, so maybe that could lead to something as well. And like you said, if someone's looking for a middle linebacker and they come and offer second, even maybe a high third round pick, Minnesota could bite. He's not going to get a first round or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Eric Kendricks get moved, to be honest with you. He's getting up there in age. I think he's still playing at a really high level, but I think he could move on. I'm putting him more at like 70%. I think there's a decent chance that he could maybe be moved, but I think he is probably going to be back. And then Harrison Smith, I think he does need a restructure, like you said, and I think he's probably willing to do that as well. He's been here his whole career. So if he's willing to do that, I think they want him around. He's pretty much the captain of that defense. The way Harrison plays is the way the defense plays. I think him and Cam Bynum in that back end, I think would be awesome, to be honest with you. And what better person to learn from than Harrison Smith with a second-year player in Cam Bynum, who I think has a lot of potential in this league. We just got a steal in the draft last year with him. So I think at this point, both those guys are going to stay. I think it's more likely Harrison stays than Kendricks, but at this point, I think they both do stay. And then we got Patrick Peterson, whose contract is currently up, but he's even said on his podcast that he'd love to stay in Minnesota. He really loves it here, loves the culture, loves the guys that he plays with. Do you think Minnesota looks at bringing him back, and what could a deal look like with Patrick Peterson and the Vikings?
I think he should be a priority, because I think it's no secret the Vikings are going to be looking at a cornerback at pick 12. That's their number one need. Sauce Gardner comes to mind from Cincinnati.
That's my boy.
Maybe if you move up from 12 to 7 in a Hunter trade, you could potentially take Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU. They just hired Dante Jones, their defensive backs coach. He was a defense coordinator at LSU, so we saw Stingley firsthand. But,
yeah, he's a beast.
So I mean, Peterson's the type of guy you bring back. He's like the Terrence Newman, where you bring him back to simply just mold these young guys, and you can't just throw a bunch of young guys out there. Dantzler's not ready. Chris Boyd is still immature, as he's always been. Mackenzie Alexander's probably not coming back. Harrison Hand is not going to be much more than just a depth piece throughout his career. He'll be in the league for a while, but it'll always be for depth. So I think bringing him back should be a priority. The expectation is 1 year, $6 million. I think that's feasible. I'd even consider giving him like a multi-year deal for like 2 years, 12, 3 years, 8.
Sure.
Just have him finish his career here because he was very appreciative and grateful of ownership, knowing that his contract expired. bringing him in as like a team captain and wanting to, get his thoughts on the Zimmer regime and everything and
Sure.
what exactly they should look for in a new coach. Like, because the
Sure.
Vikings ownership, it was Mark Wilf who was leading the way. He just respects Peterson so much. It was like Peterson, Thielen, probably Cook, and Jefferson. I actually didn't even hear Cousins, so I mean the fact that your quarterback's not there is a little concerning. But yeah, I mean I would say that the fact that Peterson, felt the love and joy over here, I think I think he would be willing to come back. I think if he hit the open market, he'd easily get $8 to $10 million per year. But I think if everything works out, I could see Peterson taking a discount and staying here
Sure.
because he's mentioned on the All Covered podcast more than anything that he loves the facility. Just the facility
Yep.
is the nicest in the league. You hear a lot of people say that. O'Connell even said during his press conference, this is a facility and a working environment that players want to play for. So,
Sure.
yeah, I think he could definitely come back. But again, if you don't figure out this Cousins and Hunter situation, there's just not enough money. And at age 31, I believe Peterson will be. He doesn't. It won't be. It doesn't make sense financially to make him a priority over certain
Right.
players. If Cousins, Hunter, other guys, if you don't redo their deals, they'll be a casualty. It's just
Yep.
how the league is.
Nope.
So
Exactly.
I think if the Vikings, I think Quasi's smart. I mean, he knows football. People don't think he knows football because he's an analytics guy and he played basketball at Princeton. He didn't really even play basketball at Princeton. He was on the JV team. He never played. He was there for an education
Right.
in economics.
Yep.
But I think he knows what it takes, and I think he knows you need to have certain veterans on the team at certain areas. It's always been big to have like a key veteran defensive lineman like a Calais Campbell, or have a veteran linebacker, such as could be anybody. I don't know. Maybe vets are in the league. Navarro Bowman was a
Right.
big vet for a while that traveled around.
Yep.
And having a veteran safety in Harrison Smith, and then maybe having
Sure.
Peterson. Those are
Yep.
guys who just make sense to have and groom young players. So I mean, when it's all said and done, I think he'll sign like a 1 year, like maybe like $7 million deal, with incentives could reach like 10 to 11. That kind of seems like the range. He seems like a guy that'll come back on a incentives based contract, which I'm sure he'll meet all those expectations. He had a very solid year. Great.
Yeah, he did.
People thought he was washed because that his career's done. But I mean, even though the defense took a toll last year, he still played well, and he had a pick six in that Bears game, Week 17. He still looks in phenomenal shape. So yeah, I stay in contact with his agent, and even if say he hits the open market, which he will, he seems like the type of guy that would at least give Minnesota a chance to match the offer.
Nope. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree. If they get their cap situation figured out and they have room to sign some veteran players, I think they should bring them back. I mean, they have to have some sort of veteran presence. I mean, they got Harrison Smith and then Eric Kendricks, and I think Patrick Peterson would fit that mold of that veteran presence in the secondary with the corners. I mean, you got Cam Dantzler. I mean, he's up and down. He'll play really crappy for a few weeks, and then he'll have a 4 or 5 week stretch where he's one of the best corners in the league, according to PFF and everything like that. But I just think he's that stable veteran guy that gives you week in and week out at least a solid performance, a level head. Because after Peterson and Dantzler, you pretty much have nobody. I mean, Chris Boyd, he can come in every now and then, make a couple plays, but you don't want him in there for prolonged periods of time. Then you got Harrison Hand. Last year, it seemed like he was on the COVID list for half the year at least. And I don't think the NFL is going to be that strict coming into next year with that, so I don't think we have to worry about that as much. But I feel like if you bring back Pat P for 1 year, then you got Cam Dantzler, and then if you can sign like a Bryce Callahan or a Kyle Fuller in free agency, and then maybe draft one of these young studs in this upcoming draft, I'd feel a lot better about our secondary going into the season than what it is right now. If we went into the season with these guys right now, we would get absolutely shredded with who we have in our secondary right now. So yeah, if he is willing to come back at a reasonable price, like you said, $6-7 million, I think he signed for 10 last year, if that's correct. Yep. So if he can come back around that number, I'd be totally open for it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
the
we're
home run would be bringing him back, drafting Sauce Gardner, maybe even taking another corner in the third round.
oh for sure, yeah,
I wouldn't even be shocked. I
yeah,
would not be shocked if they shop Cam Dantzler, and they just are
yeah,
just like, you know what, we have Harrison or we got Patrick Peterson. That's all we need right now. Just rebuild it. Um,
yeah.
Cal, if you could this offseason, hypothetically, say you could get Sauce Gardner, re-sign Patrick Peterson, sign Bryce Callahan to a prove-it deal. I mean, that's a significant improvement over last year.
Yeah.
And Callahan's got at least 3 years left at being a very
Right.
productive nickel corner. And then if you,
Yep.
because I don't see Chris Boyd returning. I think he's just very immature. And I think a lot of his social media posts are going to upset people in that front office. So, I mean, two of their first 3 picks could be cornerbacks for all we know. And I
Yeah,
want to put
for
it
sure.
past them. Maybe team up Sauce Gardner back with Kobe Bryant, the nickel corner from Cincinnati. That's another name.
Yep.
That's why I love draft season. You know, there's so many
Love it.
possibilities that they
Absolutely love
explore,
it.
so many different
For sure.
areas that they could or could not pursue. But yeah, I mean, I would say I give it about a 60% chance Pat Pete's back, maybe 60, 65.
Yep.
That seems a
Yep.
good range.
Sure thing. Yeah. And then this last guy I want to talk about, I think this is the guy that probably is gonna be a cap casualty. Just see you later, see you down the road. He just doesn't fit the 3-4, and he hasn't stayed healthy. Michael Pierce, and then you got Delvin Tomlinson. I think he's back. I thought he played pretty well, and I think he's a little more athletic to be playing in this defense. But what do you think of Michael Pierce? Do you think he's gone?
I do think he's gone, and it has nothing to do with his play. It's just he can't stay on the field. The very
Right.
first year, he opted out due to COVID. Because I believe he had like a respiratory infection or something.
Yeah, I think he had like asthma or
Yeah,
something like
that's
that, or a bad case of asthma.
he had
Yeah.
asthma, so I mean that's not a. I mean I understand safety first, but when you're trying to make an impression with a new
Right.
team, after Spielman and them, like I think they like extended Cousins at the time, 2 years, 66 million. The
Yep.
franchise tag Anthony Harris, but also signed Michael Pierce, and Pierce didn't even play for them the very first year. Then this last year he played, and I think he played fairly well. It's just he got hurt. I know he's got previous experience in a 3-4 with the Baltimore Ravens. That was back in the day when he had those like that 90+ PFF grade. So I mean, I could see them potentially wanting to at least see what he has. I'm not sure if he's like a
Sure.
restructure type candidate because I think he has like maybe like this might be his last year on his deal, and it's only like $6 million. They would free up $6 million, so he seems like the most logical candidate to cut. But if they do
Sure.
cut him, I mean, I think that just means Armon Watts is your clear cut defensive end starting next season. It'll be him, and it'll be Dalvin Tomlinson together, probably as 2 of their 3 defensive line in front. Because just in the 3-4, you have the 3. You usually have about 3 D tackles up front, and then you have your 2 edge rushers on the outside. Or, you know, that's what I mean. I don't know how they're going to construct the defense. We don't know.
Right.
And Donatello, I mean, he was the assistant for Vic Fangio. I still think Minnesota was trying to get Fangio, but they settled for Donatello.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I personally would actually like to see Michael Pierce back. You know, he put in a lot of work last offseason. I think the biggest mistake Minnesota made was like Spielman and Zimmer wanting to have them both play nose tackle when that's not what they do. You can't put
Right.
them together and think they're going to be the Williams Wall 2.0 just because they're combined 700+ pounds. Like, no. I think if you gave Pierce a chance to work with the new defensive line coach they got from Chicago. And they simply used him primarily as like the defensive end, and then have Thompson at defensive end. Using those two guys, I mean, that just makes a lot of sense. And I think they could stop the run better in a 3-4. And if you got like Danielle Hunter hypothetically on the outside, that's just going to take pressure off Pierce on the inside, and they could bust up the double A gap, and cause some damage and havoc. So yeah, I mean, he's probably gone. I would say it's about a 80% chance he's gone. But I wouldn't pass them to potentially like restructure him or try to get like a new deal, lower that cap hit.
Sure.
It's just you don't see that too often with the defensive tackle. You just don't.
Right.
So they're probably gonna let him go, and maybe this is just some maybe reckless speculation type here, but maybe they cut him and use that money to sign, say, Akeem Hicks. Hicks is a guy who him and Dalvin would be buddy. They love each other. They definitely don't have any beef whatsoever. But yeah, I mean that's the only reason. Like, if I'm like GM, I mean, if I'm thinking from Kwesi's perspective, teaming up Akeem Hicks, and replacing Hicks with Pierce makes the most logical sense if they want to go win now. But again, we talk about all episode. This all goes back to Cousins. Because if he signs that extension for 3 years, 120 or 130 for a fully guaranteed, Pierce is gone. Kendrick's potentially gone. Hunter gone. I mean, everyone is going to be gone because you can't pay everyone. And when Cousins takes up 25 to nearly 30% of the cap, guys are going to have to go. So, again, we could be talking about these guys all we want. But in reality, it all just falls on Kirk Cousins, what happens there. Because we could predict and say what we think could happen, but if Cousins is extended, you could pretty much put a lot of the guys we talked about today playing for another team next season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Michael Pierce, he probably is the most likely to be gone, and it's nothing about his play, really. I mean, he just can't stay on the field, like you said. And then you got Armon Watts kind of made the leap last year. I thought he had a really good year last year, and he's just the cheaper option at this point. Could they look to, if they could pair Akeem Hicks in there, man, that'd be awesome. He is such a game wrecker. I think that'd be awesome. But you got to have the cap space to do that. That's all that entails there. But it's just going to be an interesting few weeks. We've been saying this pretty much every episode. I mean, there's only so much to talk about when the biggest domino that needs to fall is Kirk Cousins. Once that falls, there's going to be so many different things that could play out and that we are going to watch play out, and it's going to be so fun to see. I think it's going to be more interesting if he does get traded. I just think that's going to open up a lot of areas on what we're going to do at the quarterback position and everything like that. But a lot of stuff to happen yet, Tom. A lot of stuff to happen, and it's going to happen here soon. So one more quick thought on a guy that potentially could come back. We probably don't think he will. Do you think there is a chance Anthony Barr comes back with the Vikings? Just quick on your end.
Yeah, I think the fact that O'Connell mentioned him in his press conference is huge. And I also think it would make a lot of sense from an Eric Kendricks standpoint, keeping him happy, knowing how close they are. They were college roommates, college teammates. They go way back.
Yep.
And maybe if they could even move Barr to the middle, have just him and Kendricks in the middle if they want. I think it'd make more sense as a pass rusher.
Sure.
But no, I think O'Connell and Kwesi have a lot of belief in Barr. And more so O'Connell because he saw what he did this past year for the Rams.
Yeah, he had an amazing game.
Didn't he pick off Stafford twice?
Yep.
So, I mean, he saw how versatile Barr could be. It comes down to money. Maybe if it comes down to Danielle Hunter or Anthony Barr, both could be your pass rusher, and Barr's probably $15 million less. They could do.
Right.
They could just consider, maybe Barr makes more sense financially. Not sure how the fan base will take that, and Twitter might erupt. But yeah, that's just another thought that could be going through the minds of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah right now. But I think we'll get more clarity on things by late next week. I'm sure we'll hear of a Thielen restructure. And we'll probably hear more Kirk Cousins trade rumors. It's just an everyday situation. And for anyone who wants to, if you want to really know what's going on with the Vikings, listen to Darren Doogie Wolfson. Wolfson knows exactly what's going on. And even when
he does.
Harbaugh seemed like a done deal all week long, he was like, I'm still going with Kevin O'Connell. He's like, from people I've talked to, he made an impression on them. So he really stuck to his gun, and ultimately the Vikings, they shocked everyone, and they passed
they did.
for Kevin O'Connell.
Yep.
So if you listen, I think he's got his own podcast, like
he's awesome.
The Scoop podcast, where he gives every Sunday he gives some tidbits of what's going on. So if you say Cousins is not being traded and the Cousins is not being traded, if you hear him say that they're exploring possibilities of Hunter, then Hunter's probably traded. I can't wait to see what happens, and it's going to be a really exciting next 14 to 21 days, next few weeks.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. And I think if you would have asked that question a couple weeks ago about Anthony Barr, everyone would probably say, nah, he's gone. There's no way he's coming back. But I think Kevin O'Connell is a fan, and I think now that we're moving to a 3-4 defense, I think he could be way more productive in a 3-4 than in a 4-3, for sure. So I'm excited to see that. I honestly think there's a better than a 50% chance that he's back. And I think his deal, he could probably even take a team-friendly deal. I just feel like he's that kind of guy, and he wants to stay on with Eric Kendricks. He was going to go to the Jets a few years ago, and he's like, he couldn't even sleep that night where he agreed to a deal. He's like, I can't leave Minnesota. I can't do it. So I think it's actually pretty likely that he does come back to the Vikings. Any more thoughts before we wrap this up, Tom?
No, when it comes to Kirk Cousins, I think we're going to hear more rumors start to pop up
for sure.
The next few weeks. Would not be shocked if Rodgers, decides to stay in Green Bay. Denver pops up as a possibility, and we hear George Payton and Clint Kubiak making the call. There's two former Vikings are very familiar with him. So, if next few weeks Cousins trade talks will heat up. Will they go anywhere? That's the biggest question.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest question at this point. The biggest question. And Tom and I have been talking. If we are able, if any big news do drop, we're going to try to go live and get our live reactions if we are able, if we're free to do it. We want to be that interactive guys for you guys. So stay up to tune on everything with us here. We do have a website dropping here shortly as well. We're both going to be creating content on that, articles, draft work, free agency. It'll be a little bit of everything. So again, that's Thomas. Tom, thank you again for joining me as always. You can follow him on Twitter at ThomasGorski33. Again, if you are listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you, Tom. We'll see you in the next one.